Greece votes in its fifth election in 6 years, with exit polls showing a slight lead for former Premier Alexis Tsipras and his left-wing Syriza party. A ceasefire goes into effect between Syrian pro-government forces and Islamist rebels in 3 battlegrounds districts. Meanwhile, 75 Syrian rebels trained to fight jihadists under a U.S. program have crossed into northern Syria from Turkey. And Israel deploys Iron Dome missile defense batteries in 2 southern towns after days of tension and a rocket launched on the city of Ashkelon.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. Amid a migration crisis and still lingering debt crisis, Greece went to the polls today for the 5th time in 6 years. Outgoing left-wing Premier Alexis Tsipras is competing in a tight vote, and exit polls show his left-wing Syriza party with a marginal win. Ayman Siksik has the latest.
Following months of both political and social turmoil, Greeks headed to the ballot Sunday for the 3rd time in 1 year. Initial results of the exit polls show the Syriza party has an advantage of almost 2% over its main competitor, the New Democracy Party. Ahead of the results today, Syriza party leader Alexis Tsipras, who resigned as prime minister after a legendary win for his left-wing party, maintained the same optimism he was known for before his resignation.
I'm optimistic that tomorrow a new day dawns. Today we can win, today. Difficulties will be overcome with steady steps, aware of the road we must travel on.
But despite Tsipras' optimist words, today's elections follow a year of instability in Greece. On January 25th, Tsipras was elected to reform Greece's economy. On July 5th, he announced a referendum following stunted EU talks, calling on voters to vote no on the European bailout deal. Just 1 week later, he agreed to the EU bailout despite the referendum results. A month later, the Greek parliament approved a number of controversial austerity measures. And on August 20th, Tsipras resigned, calling new elections. Tsipras also suffered a drop in popularity after signing the bailout deal. Early polls showed he had only a slight advantage on his opponent, the conservative New Democracy Party leader, Vangelis Memorakis. 61-year-old Memorakis, a member of parliament since 1989, is described by Greek commentators as the steady father figure Greeks are looking for after a year of unexpected turns with the young leader of the Syriza party.
Today is a day of celebration. Today, politicians don't speak, but the citizens do. They are speaking with their vote. I believe they want to do away with grayness, falsehoods, misery, and pretentiousness. With their vote, they want the truth to shine and bring in authentic people so we can have a better tomorrow.
Memorakis' rise follows a sense of disenchantment with Tsipras, whose victory was a landmark win for a left-wing party in modern-day Europe. But in a year of continued economic hardship and a growing crisis in dealing with refugees pouring to Greece from the Middle East, Greek voters were more hesitant this time around in deciding whether they want to gamble on Tsipras one more time.
And with me right now on the phone is the correspondent for Yediot Ahronoth newspaper. Victor Eliezer is in Athens. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening.
So, Victor, try to explain to us today the, let's say, the feeling in the streets of Athens and what is happening exactly. How does it feel to go to the polls for the 5th time in 6 years?
Look, now we have the first result from the exit poll, and it seems that Alexis Tsipras is the winner of this 3rd round of elections within this year in Greece. It means after after the great change of the 25th of January this year, when for the first time in the Greek history, the leftist party, the radical leftist party, took the power, and then we had the referendum when again Tsipras won by 62% in his no to the proposals of the European counterparts. Today, in Greece, Mr. Tsipras is the dominant political figure.
Yeah, but you know, when we are seeing the exit polls, and it shows like a really, really minor win over his over the opposition leader, what does it mean? It means that he won't have an easy life to make a coalition, to actually try to form a government, to try to actually maintain stability in Greece.
This is correct, and from tomorrow, Tsipras has to implement also a very difficult economic program, as you know, and moreover, it would be very difficult for him to form a new coalition because the Socialist Party, PASOK, who is the first candidate to be a partner in this coalition, has already put a term, a condition that only if New Democracy, the Conservative Party, participates also to this government, so they are going to join the coalition. It means that there is a pressure on Tsipras to accept a coalition with the second Conservative Party, although he has very different ideas in his own party. What he has to do is to form a coalition government for 3 years and not
Victor,
for 3 months.
one last question. What are the chances? Because according to, let's say, the first results that we're getting and we're seeing, it seems that the people of Greece actually asked from Tsipras that they want somebody to balance him. They are not agreeing 100% with the way that Tsipras is taking Greece. What are the chances that he will go to a united government?
This is a very difficult question to be replied because really Tsipras, before the elections, just 2 days ago, excluded the possibility of having a coalition partner, the Conservatives as a coalition partner. So he wants to continue with the partnership of the independent Greeks, which is a radical right populist party. And only if he has not enough mandates, so he's going to open a negotiation to form a coalition with the socialists. According to my opinion, for the time being,
yes,
I say it is very difficult to have a coalition government between the first two parties, Syriza and
yes,
New Democracy.
Yes, Victor Eliezer, thank you very, very much for this. Thank you. And with me right now here in the studio is economist Dr. Ramzi Halabi. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening.
You know, if we're hearing the opposition leader, what he said today, he said that in 1 year, the damage that Alexis Tsipras caused Greece is something that Greece will find it very difficult to go out. And it seems that the people in Greece are agreeing in one way or another. It seems that today they voted, but they didn't give him this 100% trust that he's actually going to save Greece.
Yes, you are right, because I think that 9 months ago, Alexis Tsipras promised his people a lot of things and a bright future and good things, and now he's have been forced to accept almost all the conditions of the European Union and the Central Bank of Europe, and to get the bailout package in order to save the Greek economy. So I think that he is a kind of a tragic hero. You know, before 1 year he was a big hero with a lot of promises and with a lot of principles, maybe socialist principles. And now Alexis Tsipras is weak leader.
Could he really actually, you know, make these principles come true with the really, really shaky economy that Greece was in for the last few years?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about the fact that this is very important elections, not only on the level of Greece, but on the level of Europe and even the global economy, because after these elections, Greece must act fast and take the right decisions in order to get these people and this country out of this damage. First of all, I think Tsipras, or the winner, no matter who is, must form or try to form a stable coalition, stable government in order to take the right decision. First of all, to get the bailout package of 86 billion euro. It's a lot of money. Then to have emergency loans, then to recapitalization of the banks of Greece. So there is a lot of very major decisions to make, and you need stable economy, stable politics.
In one sentence, do you think that Europe is happy with the results that it's seeing right now?
Yes, I think yes, because you know, this is the influence of Greece in Europe. There is fear that the Euro bloc will be break out, so they give the chance. Maybe this is the last chance for Tsipras and for the Greek leadership.
It seems that maybe it's the last chance for the left in Greece to actually try and make sure that they actually can manage this country. But we will wait and see. Yeah. Dr. Ramzi Halabi, thank you very, very much for this.
Pleasure. Thank you.
In Syria today, a limited truce went into effect in several battlegrounds, though it's only one part of the raging war, still far from resolved. Meanwhile, Syrian Foreign Minister Walid Muallim predicted today that Russia's increased involvement in his country will be a game changer in the international campaign against IS. Shaiban Ari has more.
A local truce came into effect on 3 battlegrounds of the Syrian civil war on Sunday, noon local time. Rebel fighters as well as pro-regime forces agreed to halt their military offensives in the town of Zabadani, near the Lebanese border, as well as in 2 Shiite villages, Fua and Kafraya, in the northern Idlib province. Pro-regime forces, dominated by Shiite Hezbollah fighters, launched a major offensive in July to recapture the strategic town of Zabadani from rebel hands. This eventually led to a deadly assault Friday by Islamist rebels against the northern Shiite villages. It is unclear how long this local truce will last and if it could provide a basis for a broader ceasefire. Previous attempts at a truce in these areas have failed. Elsewhere, fighting continues. 75 American-trained rebel fighters have entered into Syria from Turkey since Friday. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the group had crossed in a convoy of 12 vehicles under coalition air cover. While 75 fighters might not sound like a lot, their entry into Syria may have something to do with these comments by the head of U.S. Central Command last Wednesday about the previous batch of Western-trained rebels.
We've heard reports about the attacks on those individuals when they were reinserted back into Syria. Can you tell us what the total number of trained fighters remains?
The ones that are in the fight we're talking four or five.
The minimal American support for Syrian rebels contrasts with a growing Russian presence in the country, intended to strengthen the regime of Bashar al-Assad. At least 4 Russian fighter jets have now been stationed in Syria, according to American officials. This in addition to helicopter gunships, artillery, and at least 200 naval infantry troops. On Friday, U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter spoke on the phone with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Shoigu, for the first time. Shoigu's last conversation with an American defense chief was in August of last year. The two agreed to coordinate procedures for avoiding accidental military interactions between American and Russian forces in Syria. Carter told Shoigu that future talks would also focus on a political solution to the crisis, as well as a political transition in Syria.
We're prepared to negotiate. Is Assad prepared to negotiate, really negotiate? Is Russia prepared to bring him to the table and actually find the solution to this violence? Those are the pregnant questions.
For now, questions continue to be raised, but the answers remain elusive.
Yes, and with me right now is military correspondent Shai Ben-Ari. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
You're bringing right now new information, we can say, about regarding Israel's involvement and against Iranian factors in Syria.
Correct. This is information coming from the IDF. A senior military source tells I-24 News that over the past few weeks, the IDF has targeted an Iranian cell operating out of Syrian territory several times. We are talking about a cell headed by a man named Said Izzadi. Said Izzadi is basically the head of the Palestinian faction of the Quds Force. The Quds Force is, of course, the part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard which handles operations beyond Iran's borders. Izzadi was in charge of the Islamic Jihad cell, which actually fired rockets into northern Israel on August 19th. Israel says it then struck right back 2 days later and killed 4 or 5 members of that cell. But basically what we're talking about here is that all these strikes that have happened since that strike that Israel admits on August 21st, there have been a number of strikes beyond that, and Israel says, or the source says, that these strikes have targeted activities organized by this Said Izzadi.
And we were seeing also that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was a little bit worried about the involvement of Russia in Syria, but today the reports that we're reading is that Israel and Russia are going to coordinate, let's say, the involvement of Russia in Syria?
Right. We're talking about a very complex, let's say, system of interests where obviously the Russians are sending a very clear message that they are not, have no intention of backing down of their support for the Bashar al-Assad regime. Israel is interested in some sort of measure of damage control, let's say, to try and reach some understanding. Basically, there's also a lot of talk going on between the Americans and the Russians regarding exactly what kind of understandings can be reached regarding the complex situation in Syria. Everybody wants to avoid some sort of serious mistake where you could see perhaps an involvement or some sort of conflict between those two elements.
Yes, definitely. Let's stay with me right now. With me via Skype is member of the Syrian opposition, Dr. Kamal El-Labwani. Good evening. Thank you very, very much for joining me.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Labwani, try to explain to me, do you think that this truce will stay? Can we count on this truce to at least be stable in the next week or in the next weeks or in the next 24 hours?
I think the situation in Middle East is going to regional war, maybe more than regional. I think we have to be partner for peace. We have to mind each other. We are partner for peace. Think of us, and we will think of you. You have not to behave as an enemy. We face the same problem, the same conflict. And I think the visit to Moscow now is very important to say that the same thing to the Russian. Okay.
Dr. Labwani, you are talking about peace and that this region is going for a regional war, like you're saying. But I'm trying to understand. In the last few years, and forgive me for being a little bit rude, you were not able to defeat one specific target, and your one specific target was Bashar al-Assad. More than that, we're just seeing that the West, the United States, even maybe Russia, is only helping Bashar al-Assad to stay in his position. So maybe the peace should be even among the Syrian themselves, and maybe to say, okay, he's not going anywhere, maybe better the devil I know.
Any wise man understands that Bashar al-Assad is the cause of these problems. I think if they are seeking for solutions, they have to dismiss Bashar al-Assad from authority and make a new authority in the Syria so they can start negotiation to find solution. With Assad, no solution. Assad is not ready. Assad is not able to do anything now. Assad has the gun. Any wise man will understand that. If they ignore this, that means they are not seeking for peace. I think Mr. Putin will be clever enough to understand this.
Do you really think that the involvement of Russia is not something that you should be worried about? Do you think really that Vladimir Putin is able to see what you are claiming?
If Russia behave as a respectful state, I believe if Russia dismiss Iran, if Russia make a project for peace in Syria, we will welcome the Russian. But if Russia insists on helping,
yes, unfortunately, Mr. Al-Labwani, we cannot hear you, and we have some technical problems connecting with you in the Skype. But what he is saying, it seems that, Shai, if we're looking at the current situation, the opposition, and we heard so many oppositions coming up in the last few years and getting into this fight, they were not actually able to beat Bashar al-Assad. They were not actually to provide any solution.
Right, and the developments that you've been seeing over the past 2 years, let's say, is that Islamist factions have really taken over the whole Syrian opposition. The Americans started out with a very ambitious plan of basically backing up the moderate rebels. The moderate rebels have just more or less become the non-existent rebels over the past year or two, let's say, and we're talking about a very big challenge. Regarding the truce in the Zabadani area and also in parts of Idlib, this is a very, it's very experimental at this stage, and there have been previous attempts to do a similar thing. The idea is to perhaps start at local levels and then move on to a more broader, let's say, a truce on a larger scale. But we'll see if even this lasts, because there were previous attempts that just collapsed within a few days. This is holding out for less than a day so far.
And of course, everything is working the best for IS.
Certainly.
Definitely. Shai Ben-Ari, thank you very much for this.
Problem.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Yukiya Amano, is in Iran today, where he is meeting with President Hassan Rouhani and Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. It comes as the IAEA preparing assessment on possible military dimensions of Iran's nuclear program due to the end of the year. Elia Khumberg explains.
Ahead of the expected report by the UN watchdog on Iran's nuclear activities, IAEA Chief Yukiya Amano arrived in Tehran Sunday to discuss unresolved ambiguities over the possible military dimensions of the country's nuclear program. As part of the roadmap agreed upon between world powers and the Islamic Republic last July in Vienna, Iran and the agency have until October 15 to hold technical meetings and carry out other steps to clarify the remaining questions about Iran's nuclear past. By December 15, IAEA must submit its conclusions before moving on to the deal's implementation phase. The IAEA will also have the task of verifying that Iran has scaled down its nuclear activities in accordance with the deal, which says Tehran must curb its nuclear activities to a point where producing a nuclear weapon is not possible. On their one-day trip, Amano and his team held meetings with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, the country's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, and the head of the Iranian Atomic Energy Agency, Ali Akbar Salehi. Amano further addressed the 12-member committee authorized by the Iranian parliament to examine the deal. It is still unclear whether there will be a vote in parliament over the agreement, but Iranian lawmakers are currently at the final stages of reviewing the text of the nuclear agreement.
And with me right now is Iranian politics analyst Mayor Javed Anfar. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
You need to explain to me what you just said.
Just looking at the pictures in the parliament talking about the nuclear deal in Iran, and I just said, what a show. Because the Supreme Leader has already approved this deal. The Majlis is not going to go against the Supreme Leader. And so this is just basically a show to gain legitimacy for the deal that's been made and for all the red lines that the Supreme Leader has crossed. But I have to say, it's pretty smart of the regime to do this.
Explain to me the assessment of possible military dimensions that this deal can cause in Iran or in the region.
Well, let's see what they say. If from what we know from the alleged documents that were disclosed to the IAEA, Iran had been working in a chamber on surrogate explosives for a nuclear weapon. You can't actually test the explosives for a nuclear weapon, so you do surrogate testing. And apparently some testing took place in Parchin, and which was part of the whole nuclear trigger system. We have to wait and see what the IAEA says. What I have to warn you and all the I-24 viewers is that nobody except the IAEA and Iran knows how this will be carried out. This is top secret. So any news you hear that the Iranians will be carrying out their own inspections, this is pure speculation, not based on facts, because we don't know.
You know, if I'm looking right now at the current situation with, let's say, the international community approving, and of course this deal has passed, and the Iranians will inspect or won't expect the increased involvement of Iran in the Middle East, in all the conflicts that are happening, is only causing Iran to, what, be stronger and bigger now with Russia getting into the business? Or it's just will make Iran, in one way or another, just more careful with the next steps that it's going to take?
I think it's going to make the regime more confident in what it does in the region, but I think it's going to make the government more apprehensive because, see, Mr. Rouhani wants to bring a little bit of stability to Iran's economy. Mr. Rouhani needs stability for Iran's economy. He needs to calm all the tensions down. But the regime, with what it's doing in Lebanon and what it's doing, is more importantly in Syria, is going to increase the tensions between Iran and their neighbors.
But this is what Rouhani wants. What does Khamenei want?
Well, Khamenei, I think, is closer to the regime. He's the head of the regime. He's not the head of the government, Mr. Rouhani. And there is a definite conflict of interest there because Ayatollah Khamenei and the IRGC seem to be actually wanting to continue with the status quo ante with Syria, which means more clash of interest with the Saudis. This is what Rouhani does not want. Increasing tensions with the United States is, again, this is not what Rouhani wants. So there is a clash of interest, but this has been there from the beginning because Rouhani has belonged to the more moderate part of the Iranian system, which is close to Mr. Rafsanjani and wants better relations with Saudis, but the regime wants something else.
But, you know, I'm trying to understand who at the end of the day will win this battle between the regime and the government. Because it seems that if the regime, like you taught me, that the regime is the one who's calling the shots, at the end of the day, Rouhani will find himself out of the game.
When it comes to Syria, definitely. In the economy, the government has got more of a say, but what happens in the Middle East, the regime has got a much stronger hand than the foreign ministry, which belongs to the government. Mr. Rouhani was damned if he did and damned if he didn't get the deal. If he didn't get the deal in Iran, he would have been blamed. Now that he's gotten the deal and he needs the stability to make the sanctions relief work for Iran's economy, it's very unlikely that he's going to get it from the regime and its activities in Syria. More importantly, Lucy, you know, compromises have been made. Red crosses have been crossed by the supreme leader. He's not going to take the responsibility. Who is going to take the responsibility? Who? Probably Mr. Rouhani.
Probably Mr. Rouhani. One word about Israel?
We have to be very concerned about what's happening in Syria, especially transfer of Russian weapons into the hands of Bashar al-Assad and even more so Hezbollah.
So, you know, maybe at the end of the day, Benjamin Netanyahu had a really, really, really good reason to say why no to the deal.
I don't agree with that.
I knew that you're not going to agree with that. Mayor Javed Anfar, thank you very, very much for this. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and I'll be back after the small break. Greece votes in its 5th election in 6 years, with exit polls showing a slight lead for former Premier Alexis Tsipras and his left-wing Syriza party. A ceasefire goes into effect between Syrian pro-government forces and Islamist rebels in 3 battlegrounds districts. Meanwhile, 75 Syrian rebels trained to fight jihadists under a U.S. program have crossed into northern Syria from Turkey. And Israel deploys Iron Dome missile defense batteries in 2 southern towns after days of tension and a rocket launch on the city of Ashkelon. Welcome back to the news today. Israel today deployed 2 Iron Dome missile defense batteries in the southern towns of Netivot and Sderot after days of tensions in Jerusalem and a rocket launch on the city of Ashkelon. Israel's security cabinet also met today on new ways to deal with rock throwing and fire bombings. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, protests are ongoing against President Mahmoud Abbas. Elio Ochenberg sums up.
After days of escalating violence, Israel's security cabinet convened Sunday, discussing new proposals governing how Israeli police deal with assailants when lives are on the line. Under the new regulations, police will be allowed to use live ammunition when civilian lives are in danger, as well as against people who throw rocks and firebombs. The meeting also included a discussion on the upsurge in violence in Jerusalem, especially in the Flashpoint Temple Mount compound, which as for now has shown little signs of ending.
This incitement comes from the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamic movement in Israel, Hamas, and I am sorry to say that the Palestinian Authority is also actively participating in this.
Meanwhile, in the West Bank, Palestinians demonstrated against Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, demanding he resign and also end security cooperation with Israel. The protest began after Palestinian Authority forces attempted to prevent demonstrators in Bethlehem from confronting Israeli forces over the tensions on the Temple Mount. During the clashes, the Palestinian forces hit a Palestinian teen, which triggered the campaign against the PA itself. But it's not only Jerusalem and the West Bank which are heating up. On Friday night, 2 rockets were launched from the Gaza Strip towards Israel's southern communities. One of them was intercepted and the other landed near a house, causing damage but no casualties. In response, IDF aircrafts attacked 3 terror targets in the northern part of the Gaza Strip.
And with me right now here in the studio to understand a little bit more what is happening here in the region is former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Dani Ayalon. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And Senior Middle East Analyst Ali Wakin. Good evening. Ali, let's start with the footage that we're seeing in the protest in the West Bank against Mahmoud Abbas. These are some rare, let's say, statements that we're hearing from the Palestinians that are actually going against Mahmoud Abbas with no shame at all.
They are going against the security. They are going against the security coordination, but they are going again what they see as the incapacity of the Palestinian Authority to reach any breakthrough in the situation of the Palestinian, whether with Israel or whether with Hamas. They are seeing what they consider as Israeli right-wing provocations on the Al-Aqsa Mosque Temple Mount, and on the other hand, the Palestinian Authority, in order to prevent any escalation, is attacking demonstrators in the way that we saw in the video. So on one hand, they don't see any progress in their life, they don't see any political horizon, and on the other hand, they see the Palestinian Authority acting this way, and it kept the Palestinians in the West Bank little choices, and we see that the demonstrators that went to the streets in the weekend maybe will be the first flame, but we should pay attention, Lucy, that last weekend it was the same picture and footages we saw in the Gaza Strip, this time against Hamas.
Against Hamas. What is happening here, Ambassador Ayalon? Because if Israel is right now seeing Palestinians going out on the streets yelling against Mahmoud Abbas, I don't know, if I was right now in the government, I would be a little bit worried about this, because it means that they lost the trust of the two sides.
Well, absolutely, you're right, Lucy. And Israel has to worry about many things. Mr. Abbas now is promising to throw a bombshell in the UN speech, actually at the end of this month. We see the rising, of course, some say it may be the third intifada, the Rocks intifada, and specifically in the area of Jerusalem. And many in Israel, and I have not seen any intelligence reports, so I don't know, but they believe that it is Abu Mazen, prior to his UN speech, is actually flaming the streets, and it's his interest actually to attract attention to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount. Maybe because of what Ali said here, that there is no progress, not with Hamas, and not a political process. So maybe this is something that would benefit him. I don't know yet. But in any case, from the Israeli point of view, they see it as premeditated. They see it as part of the incitement, both from the Palestinian Authority and, of course, and Hamas. And Bibi is under a lot of pressure. He has been criticized by people like Lieberman or Lapid, that he promised security, and there is no security.
Lucy, I totally disagree with Mr. Ayalon, because the picture we saw from Bethlehem is the picture that Abu Mazen want to go with to the UN, and saying, I'm still committed to the security coordination and to the agreements with Israel. Don't oblige me to put this bombshell on the table and declare that the Oslo Agreement is no more an agreement that the Palestinian Authority is committed to, and we are a state under occupation, and from now it's to the occupiers to deal with and to take care of 3 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And and about what is happening in the Temple Mount, when Abu Mazen see that the Islamic movement and other factions and Hamas are dictating the tone, the Fatah cannot stay behind. And we should not forget, we are talking about East Jerusalem, and it's comfortable for Abu Mazen to see East Jerusalem like burning while he is doing everything in order to keep the West Bank calm.
Let's join to this conversation former Palestinian Minister of Prisoner Affairs Ashraf Al-Ajrami. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening.
So, Mr. Al-Ajrami, how did, let's say, the footage of seeing, let's say, Palestinian police officers hitting young people, hitting protesters, this is not making, let's say, Mahmoud Abbas in a very comfortable situation?
I think it was a very bad accident for the President Mahmoud Abbas and for the Palestinian Authority, especially when the Israeli extremist groups went to Al-Aqsa Mosque and people wanted to demonstrate some kind of solidarity with Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Holy Square. So it is anti the public opinion in the Palestinian Authority. So it was a very bad scene for the Palestinian people and for the Palestinian Authority, and because of that, the Palestinian Authority punished.
I'm just trying to imagine, Mr. Al-Ajrami, I'm just trying to imagine if these soldiers that we're seeing here, or these policemen that we're seeing here, were Israeli soldiers, all the West Bank will go into flames, because the Palestinian Authority will never accept that anyone or any Israeli soldier will actually treat somebody like that. So when we are seeing these images, this is definitely what? Mahmoud Abbas is trying to make Israel satisfied with these images, that he's actually hitting his own people, and on the other side saying, you see, I can maintain the situation. I can actually control what is happening, so everything's okay. But Israel doesn't trust him anyway.
The situation here, if the Palestinian Authority doesn't want to have clashes with Israel. So the policemen and the soldiers try to prevent a situation of clashes with the Israelis. But they can't do it without using some kind of violence by the people to reach these places, without using this brutality of response.
Yes. Mr. Al-Ajrami, thank you very much for this. Ali, you want to say something?
Lucy, Mr. Ambassador said that the Palestinian Authority is also responsible for the incitement. Mr. Netanyahu said at the beginning of this morning cabinet meeting that the Palestinian Authority is also part of the incitement. But when we see these footages, and the Palestinian Authority is doing everything, and the policemen were not masked. 5-6 years ago, we could not imagine to see Palestinian security men hitting and oppressing demonstrators when they are totally revealed. And 3-4 days ago, in the refugee camp of Jenin, the most symbolic camp of the Palestinian West Bank, the Palestinian security forces did not hesitate to confront demonstrators and militants of the Islamic Jihad and of Hamas, revealed with guns to say we are not going to allow any escalation in the West Bank.
Yes, continue.
And with this, Abu Mazen is going to the international community saying, I'm doing everything. Now it depends on you whether are you going to support me or not.
Exactly in this line, because it seems that Mahmoud Abbas is, if I'm going with the same line that Ali is saying here, it seems that Mahmoud Abbas is trying to signal to Israel everything. He's trying to go with flashlights. I want to go back to the negotiation table. Please trust me. See that what I'm doing is I'm actually trying to control, but you are not trusting me. You're telling me that I'm helping the incitement in East Jerusalem, helping the incitement in the West Bank. It seems that Israel is signaling back, we don't want to sit down with you and talk with you.
Lucy, about a week ago, Mr. Netanyahu was in London. He met with Cameron and he said openly, I call on Mr. Abbas to sit with me directly, whether in Ramallah or in Jerusalem, no preconditions, direct talks. No response from Mr. Abbas. At the same time, we hear today that Mr. Abbas says, we welcome, I quote, we welcome every drop of blood spilled in Jerusalem. So I agree with Ali that for Abbas, it's good to have this picture that Palestinian policemen are trying to, to stop violence, because it's good before he comes to the international community. But at the same time, so he talks.
But you don't think that he needs to talk in both languages, because
yes,
in one way or another he needs to talk to his own people, and another way he needs to show the Israelis that he is actually maintaining and controlling the situation.
But when he says, I welcome drops of blood in Jerusalem, I agree with Ali. It's for Abbas to have this third intifada, if it will be like that. In Jerusalem, he enjoys everything, because it's not his responsibility. East Jerusalem is Israeli territory, so he cannot be accused of, not controlling his people. And at the same time, pictures like that we saw here with the Palestinian policeman, he is a man of peace. He is a man that is against terror, but at the same time, the incitement. Also, I think in Israel, it was very badly taken when he said something that we should not allow the Israeli filthy booth or the filthy feet to be on in an Aqsa mosque. This is something which evoked all the anti-Semitic fears, because for many years, we were called filthy Jews. So using all these rhetorics is also very bad, and this is also what is part of the incitement.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for this. Thank you. To the migration crisis in Europe, Hungarian tanks have been stationed on a Croatian border after Hungary accused Croatia of lying about a bilateral agreement with Budapest to move thousands of migrants to the Hungarian border. More than 20,000 people entered Croatia as the midday Saturday, with the country only prepared to handle 500 a day. Ori Shapira has the latest.
The migrant crisis in Europe continued to intensify Sunday. Hungary reopened its main border with Serbia following growing tension with neighboring Croatia, which was forced to take in around 20,000 migrants since the frontier was closed. However, Budapest still accuses Croatia of violating Hungary's sovereignty by sending migrants across the border on a train escorted by Croatian forces.
Practically in recent days, the government of Croatia has continuously lied in the face of the Hungarian people, lied in the face of the Croatian people, and lied in the face of the whole European Union.
Meanwhile, in Turkey, the crisis continues to take a toll in lives. At least 13 migrants were killed off the coast Sunday when an inflatable dinghy collided with a ferry on its way to Greece. At least 26 others are feared missing in a different incident involving another boat which sank off the Greek island of Lesbos. Greece's Coast Guard said it managed to rescue at least 22 survivors. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu met refugee protesters and said he hoped the land border with Greece would be opened to allow them in and avoid more tragedies.
You are always welcome in our country. You are our guests here. Your voice was heard in the world with this protest. My request from you is, since your voice was heard with this protest, I ask you to return to your life routine.
But with all due respect to Turkey and Hungary, the countries which will mainly have to handle this crisis are Germany and Austria, the countries many of the migrants see as their final destination. According to the Austrian police spokesman, more than 10,000 migrants walked into Austria from Hungary since midnight. The number continues to grow, and answers are yet to be found.
And before we're continuing with the migration crisis, I just want to give you an update on elections in Greece, where exit polls are showing an increasingly bigger margin of a win for Alexis Tsipras, now forecasted to have 35 to 35 of the vote. And the leader of the Greek conservative New Democracy Party has now conceded defeat. And we're continuing with the migration crisis. With us right now via Skype is I-24 News contributor in Germany, Polina Garaev. Thank you very, very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Polina, so let's try to understand what is the current situation, because it seems, you know, that every day that passes, this crisis is just going further and further down the headlines, and it's just like people are getting used for the migration crisis.
Mm-hmm. That is true. That is also in the atmosphere here in Germany. I think that Germany has come to terms with the idea that it will be absorbing 800,000 refugees by the end of the year. And it's now working on a more concrete plan how to integrate them into society, because this plan did not exist so far. Germany opened its borders mostly as reaction to the developing humanitarian crisis in Hungary, and it was not prepared to absorb this large number. Now it's working on plans in terms of education for refugees, work opportunities, housing. Of course, this has been an issue, and it's continuing to be an issue. How to find enough facilities across Germany for all the incoming people. So this is the vibe now in Germany. They're thinking long term. They're thinking, how can we integrate these people in our society, also to alleviate the economic burden, and of course to alleviate opposition, which is still strong, and we are still seeing arson attacks and in general attacks targeting refugees across Germany.
Polina, you know, in the meantime, Germany is actually trying to see, let's say, the next step. It seems that the rest of Europe is not being able to handle or to digest this. Do you see these symbols of, let's say, a crisis between the European countries themselves about the way that they're handling this?
Mm-hmm. Of course, there's a bit of resentment towards other European countries for not carrying the same load as Germany is. Germany understands that it is the most coveted destination for most refugees, but it does feel that other countries should step up and open their gates and offer more benefits, better asylum conditions. And it has been voiced also by Germany, and most recently by the interior minister of her party also, who stipulated that Germany cannot accommodate all the people who want to settle here. This is not what Merkel herself said. She made clear that all those who need help will find it here in Germany, but yes, of course it's creating a lot of dispute.
Polina Garaev, thank you very, very much for this. Now to the U.S. campaign to the U.S. campaign. A new CNN ORC poll shows Carly Fiorina in the number 2 spot in the GOP, as U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton accused Donald Trump of bullying and buying his way into the presidency. Here's more from ABC News.
This is the first time in my life that I've caused controversy by not saying something. I didn't say anything.
Back on the campaign trail in Iowa Saturday night, Donald Trump had his first say in person about what he did not say on Thursday, reading from tweets he had sent out earlier in the day.
Am I morally obligated to defend the president every time somebody says something bad or controversial about him? I don't think so.
This is the exchange that has hounded Trump because his critics say he failed to repudiate the questioner's provocative remarks.
We have a problem in this country. It's called Muslims. We know our current president is one. Right. You know he's not even an American.
Trump canceled a campaign stop the next day. In Iowa, he fought back.
You know, they wanted me to speak up in favor of the president. Do you think he's going to speak up in favor of me? Why do I think he's not?
Campaigning in New Hampshire, Hillary Clinton busted a move with supporters but didn't dance around the Donald.
The way he handled the question about President Obama was shocking, but not surprising. He's been trafficking in prejudice and paranoia throughout this campaign.
Later, Donald Trump was the guest of Iowa's Urbandale High School.
Would I consider putting a Muslim American in my cabinet? Absolutely no problem with that.
And with me right now is correspondent Charles Bilbazar. Good evening.
Hi, Lucy.
You know, you have a big smile because what? You are saying, oh, I was so right at the beginning. This is not going to last.
It doesn't look as though it's going to last, and the Trump Express may have hit its first speed bump.
Explain.
A new CNN ORC poll, that the first one real, the first major one to come out since the second debate, in which I didn't think that Trump performed very well, shows that he's gone from 32% down to 24% over the span of only a couple of weeks.
This is an amazing decrease in the numbers.
It's an 8-point decrease, very fast, mimicking his meteoric rise. So the question now, is this the end of Donald Trump? What can he do in order to stem this new trend? You're going to see this is going to, for the first time he's facing adversity, we'll have to see how he contends with it.
Can we say that maybe the shtick is getting older?
It could be. It's getting even more offensive as we go along as well with his recent comments, as you saw in the piece here. That being said, there are certain people who are benefiting from Trump's decrease in the polls, primarily Carly Fiorina, who a lot of people said won the debate. She went from 3% in the CNN ORC poll earlier in September to now 15%. So that's a jump of 12 points, which is a huge, huge climb.
And Ben Carson and
Ben Carson trailing in third, down 4 points at 14%, but he had a major gaffe today. He went out, and this is on the heels of Trump not defending Obama when someone suggested that Obama was a Muslim. Ben Carson decided that it would be wise for him today to say that he doesn't think that a Muslim is fit to be president of the United States because his or her values do not accord with the U.S. Constitution.
Perfect.
Yes, wonderful. And this is coming from a guy whose major appeal is the fact that he's very well spoken, reserved. This could spell the demise of Mr. Carson.
You know what? Mr. Ben Carson was, you know, one of the leading, let's say, campaigners in this in these elections, and it seems that he also, again, needs to go even further to the right in order to bring somebody. But I don't understand how a person who is a minority in the United States is acting.
But this is something, it's a very good point that you're raising, because in the wake of his first decrease, you see him all of a sudden coming up with these crazy statements, very Trump-esque, perhaps in order to try and regain traction with the base of the Republican Party, for whom these types of statements have had an impact thus far over the course of the campaign.
And if we're looking at the women between the candidates, she is actually a surprise in all of this, because we've been talking a lot about Jeb Bush, and we've been talking that is actually really going down the hill. Yeah. She is a big surprise.
Fiorina is coming from, if you remember during the first debate, she didn't make the primetime debate. She was in the second-tier debate. She performed well, and that got her into the second debate. But now the national spotlight is on her, and she's also a flawed candidate in very many ways. She had a very unsuccessful run for the Senate in 2010. She lost by over 1 million votes in California. There's also some shady business deals with Iran while she was at the helm of Hewlett-Packard in contravention of an executive order. This type of stuff is all going to come out now that the limelight is now shown upon her. So we'll see if she can weather the storm, as other candidates have thus far done.
I'm going to give you one small bet before we're finishing. Who do you think is going to lead in the next poll?
In the next poll, I still think Trump will come out on top, but I think that his margin will be decreasing. But if you're really looking at someone who's going to possibly rise over the course of the next little while, my guess is Marco Rubio, who went from 3% to 11% in this latest poll, an establishment figure, very, very refined, a lot of appeal for Republican voters.
It's on the record.
It's on the record.
Okay, I'm going to check this.
Good.
Trust me.
I like to be held to account, Lucy. It's important.
Of course it's important.
Absolutely.
Charles Bilbazar, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Amid stepped-up security and on the heels of a deadly protest, Nepal today adopted a new constitution. It's aimed at bolstering its transformation from a Hindu monarchy to a secular federal democracy. It passed on Wednesday after a decade of political infighting and violent protest. The change sets the country up as a secular federation of 7 states, each with a legislator and chief minister. Hundreds of thousands turned up today in Havana's iconic Revolution Square to attend Mass held by Pope Francis in the highlight of his trip to Cuba. Maya Margit has the story.
A cause for celebration in Cuba. Tens of thousands of people filled Havana's Revolution Square on Sunday for Pope Francis's historic Mass. To welcome the Pope, who helped bring about the recent rapprochement between Cuba and the United States, a giant poster of Jesus Christ was hung in the plaza. Many pilgrims had high expectations for the visit, and some even camped out in the square overnight. Cuban President Raúl Castro and Argentine President Cristina Kirchner were among those in attendance.
We are thankful for your support over the dialogue between the United States and Cuba. The reestablishment of diplomatic relations has been a first step in the process towards the normalization of ties between both countries, which will be needed to resolve problems and repair injustices. The embargo, which causes human harm and damages to Cuban families, is cruel, immoral, and illegal. It needs to end.
During Mass, Pope Francis warned of the dangers of power and ideology, but steered clear of openly criticizing the country's communist leaders. But upon arriving on Saturday, he urged the U.S. and Cuba to deepen their détente.
For some months now, we have witnessed an event which fills us with hope. The process of normalizing relations between two peoples following years of estrangement. It is a sign of the victory of the culture of encounter and dialogue. I urge political leaders to persevere on this path. The world needs reconciliation in this atmosphere of a third world war.
Many Cubans appreciate the Pope for his role in the secret talks that led to last December's breakthrough with Washington, when Castro and U.S. President Barack Obama resolved to end more than half a century of Cold War-era animosity. After his 4-day visit in Cuba, Francis will fly to Washington for meetings with Obama and addresses at the U.S. Congress and United Nations.
And that's it. We're going out for a small break, an update from our news desk, and then we will be back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the news today. Cyber warfare has become a major threat to global security, with attacks capable of crippling critical military defense and other infrastructure. Amid accusation that China has conducted multiple cyber attacks on U.S. targets, the two countries are now moving towards signing the first ever deal of its kind for cyberspace. I-24 News correspondent Charles Bublizer explains.
It is perhaps the fastest growing modern-day battlefield, cyberspace, with online digital attacks against critical infrastructure having the potential to bring even a superpower to its knees.
Cyber threats to U.S. national and economic security are increasing in frequency, scale, sophistication, and the severity of impact. These cyber threats come from a range of actors, including those with highly sophisticated cyber programs, most notably Russia and China.
Against this backdrop, Washington and Beijing are reportedly negotiating the first ever deal outlining the terms of engagement for cyber warfare. According to the New York Times, the U.S. would like China to embrace a code of conduct limiting attacks during peacetime. But this would fall significantly short of explicitly prohibiting espionage and intellectual property theft, which China has been accused of conducting.
We hope that the U.S. stops its groundless attacks against China, starts a dialogue based on a foundation of mutual respect, and jointly builds a cyberspace that is peaceful, secure, open, and cooperative.
Thank you, Mr.
The
President.
issue has strained ties between the world's two biggest economies. Most notably, Chinese hackers were implicated in the massive breach at the U.S. government's personnel office disclosed in July, which exposed the personal data of millions of federal employees. Similarly, a bilateral cyber working group was suspended by Beijing last year after Washington indicted 5 Chinese military officers for hacking U.S. computers. In response, President Barack Obama called last week for a global framework to prevent the internet from becoming, quote, weaponized, while warning of a forceful response to cyber attacks.
We are preparing a number of measures that will indicate to the Chinese that this is not just a matter of us being mildly upset, but is something that will put significant strains on the bilateral relationship if not resolved, and that we are prepared to take some countervailing actions.
In the past, Washington threatened to sanction Chinese individuals and companies that have been accused of hacking U.S. corporate databases. But the current talks could open the door for a rapprochement. An agreement could be announced as early as Thursday, when Chinese President Xi Jinping arrives in Washington for a state visit.
And with me right now here in the studio is cyber threat expert Dr. Tal Pavel. Good evening.
Good evening.
So what are the chances that, after an agreement will be signed, if it will be signed, somebody will actually stop eavesdropping or stop attacking the United States, or vice versa, the United States will stop attacking China?
Not at all, because we see in those days that the cyberspace is a new tool in the hands of nations, and not only superpowers, in days of war, but in ordinary days, as we saw last month in the case of Office of Personnel Management, as it was indicated in this report, in which something between 20 and 25 million records were hacked and leaked, allegedly by the Chinese.
But but in the same note, and when we're talking, let's say, in the same, I'm trying to think, because if such an agreement will be actually signed, it will be the first time that this open space of cyber, let's say, the cyber world or the cyber warfare, it will be the first time that it will be under legislation. It will be the first time that something is being legalized in this department.
Well, as far as concerned for the relationship between US and China, but we saw a few months ago kind of agreement like this between Russia and China, that the bottom line is that they declared that they will not attack each other on this cyberspace. We saw a few weeks ago that China declared that the cyberspace is part of the sovereignty. So we are facing a lot of incidents of leaks, of especially sabotage, intrusions against infrastructure in the US. There is no smoking gun.
So let's see how the United States is seeing it. And with me right now is journalist Martin Himmel from the United States. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me, Martin.
Good evening.
So, Martin, what is it? Is it if you can beat them, join them? Or is it another diplomatic move that President Barack Obama is doing before he is finishing his term?
Well, they're basically following the model of what happened with the nuclear arms race in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. At that time, no one would convince either the United States or Russia to get rid of the nuclear arsenal, so they tried to limit its use. They tried to limit on how it would be using. They tried to limit the last resort of massive self-assured destruction. So here they're basically trying to put limits on a weapon that could be totally devastating in a mass scale by saying, well, if there ever is going to be a conflict, we both agree we're not going to turn our attention to trying to shut down hospitals, power stations, and other life important uses. So it's a way of limiting warfare. What
are the gains, Martin, for the United States from this? Is it only fear of actual cyber attack, or the United States is going to actually gain something from it?
They're trying to put limits on the use of cyber bombardment. I mean, the Chinese have are probably the leading cyber attackers in the United States right now. They are stealing millions of identity facts from the American government. They are probing into the Air Force Central Command. So all this is basically trying to say, hey, let's put limits on this. We can attack you, you can attack us, but let's try to put it into some sort of reasonable place.
You know, when we're looking at this specific situation, was there an actual fear that the Chinese hit, let's say, a sensitive button in the United States security?
Well, there are two issues that come to mind. Several years ago, there was a reasonable belief that they were heading into the Central Command of the U.S. Air Force, and that gave a big scare. And more recently, the Americans believed they were behind the identity theft of about 20 million people who work or have dealings with the American government. And that by itself is very scary for them.
Yes, Martin Himmel, thank you very, very much for this. You know, I'm trying to think if you can put under legislation this really, let's say, open space like you're talking about. Can you actually control cyber war? Can you actually control what is happening in the internet? Can you control our lives when this is just, we feel that it's uncontrollable?
Definitely not. The bottom line, definitely not, because if we saw, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, a series of attacks against U.S. banks. It was under the name of Ezadin Cyber Brigades. Well, was it really made by Ezadin Cyber Brigades? Well, the claim is that the state behind those attacks against the U.S. banks, Iran. So we cannot know who is behind those attacks on a daily basis, as we saw regarding the Office of Personnel Management and Infrastructure in the US and elsewhere. We saw several attacks against the Bundestags in Germany a few months ago. So creating kind of frameworks, it's perhaps nice to have, but I hardly believe can it be really in the physical world, because it's not missiles that you can count how many missiles do you have and how many launch of the missiles did you launch, but it's something that there is inside the computers, inside the information system, and you can never know who is behind those attacks and the basic things of what we call the attribution problem.
Yes, Dr. Tal Pavel, you're never making me more comfortable about this whole, or optimistic about this whole situation with the cyberspace thing. I'm always getting out of here more worried. Tal Pavel, thank you very, very much for this. Thank you. And right now we're going to the African-rooted religion of Santeria has exited in awkward overlap with Catholicism in Cuba since it was a Spanish colony. Amid the visit of Pope Francis to Havana, here's a closer look.
A Santeria ceremony in central Havana. Marcelo has come to worship Saint Lazarus, also known as Baba Luaye in the Afro-Cuban religion, after recovering from surgery. Here, West African deities of the Yoruba religion and Catholic saints coexist and blend to a point where they merge into one.
As Cubans, we are proud. I am proud of being able to have both things and to believe in both without separating them. I consider them equal. I give the same importance to the Catholic religion and the Afro-Cuban religion.
Back in the 17th century, Spanish conquistadors sent thousands of slaves from modern-day Nigeria and its surrounding countries to work on Cuba's coffee and sugarcane plantations. The slaves brought with them their beliefs, but soon those were outlawed, and believers had to disguise their ceremonies as Catholic rites. Fast forward to the 1950s, Cuba's socialist revolution was originally hostile to all religions, but in 1992, the state abandoned atheism and Afro-Cuban religions were allowed to flourish. Pope Francis is the third pontiff to visit Cuba in less than 20 years. A sign, perhaps, that the Vatican is keen to reinvigorate Catholicism in an island where millions of believers share their faith with another religion.
And with me right now is Jonathan Regev.
Yes, I am.
How are you?
Not bad. How are you?
All good?
All good. Yourself?
I'm not going to tell the viewers what you just said.
Did I say something?
No. But it's going to be a secret between you and me.
I never say anything.
You never say anything?
No.
Nothing at all?
Obscene things, not from me.
No.
Never happened.
No. So this is why you're going to update us about basketball.
Sports, yes. The European Basketball Championship is in its final. The final is played right now. We spoke about this. Spain is leading after 3 quarters, 60-43 against Lithuania. unless something incredibly big happens in the final quarter, Spain will be once again European champions, as it seems.
So this is the latest update.
This is the latest update.
And you want to right now talk about rugby,
Yes.
which is the most interesting game in the world.
Yes, now we said unless something big, very big happens in basketball, something huge happened in rugby last night. We spoke about South Africa being one of the biggest favorites. They lost to Japan 34-32 in their opening match. Just to understand, Japan is a good team. They played in every World Cup so far, and yet they played 23 games in the World Cup. They've won one up until yesterday. They beat South Africa, one of the best three nations in the world, a nation that won the World Cup twice in the past. And I see you're not impressed with rugby.
No, it seems like a really, really violent game, and now I understand. Do you remember the episode in Friends where Ross plays rugby?
Of course,
it
yes.
Reminds. I understand
when
now.
He wanted to impress Emily.
Yes, when he wanted to.
Yes, yes.
You don't want to impress me by playing rugby.
I do. I'll impress you by talking about tennis.
Okay, so talk about
So
it.
impressive.
So impressive.
The Davis final is set. It will be Great Britain against Belgium. The Brits are back to the finals for the first time since 1978. The last time they won it is 1936.
1936.
That's the last time Great Britain won the Davis Cup. They have a very good chance. They have Andy Murray, who was a vital player in the win against Australia in the semi-final. It was played in Glasgow because Andy Murray is a Scot, and of course they wanted to bring a lot of Scottish people, and they did. They will face Belgium, who unfortunately for me beat Argentina 3-2 in the other semi-final.
Do you know how to do an accent from Glasgow?
It's a great odor. It's fresh air. It's from a movie.
I'm from Glasgow.
Glasgow.
I'm from Glasgow.
Again, I'm hoping Sean Connery is not watching us once again.
Yes, I really hope. No, why? He should watch us.
Yes, yes.
And you should pick up the phone and call
Not when I
him.
do an impression of a terrible Scottish accent.
Okay, so how fast can you climb 82 floors?
Yes, yes, it's the vertical run. The vertical run in China. 82 stores running up one of the tallest buildings in China, in Beijing. 2,041 stairs all the way. And it took the winner just over 9 minutes to do it. It would take me 9 days to climb 82 floors.
We can do it in Azrieli Center.
Yeah, there is a competition of this kind in Azrieli Center. Only Azrieli Center, I think, is 40-something floors tall. This is about almost twice as much.
Almost twice as how?
Yes.
82 floors?
82 floors, 2,041 stairs.
This
from
is
bottom
a
to
lot
top.
of steps
A lot
to
of
climb,
a lot of stairs.
Jonathan. Yes,
82 floors.
just a lot of steps. Okay, Jonathan Regeb, thank you very much.
I'm impressed.
You are impressed by it.
Yes!
Jonathan Regeb, thank you very much. And that's it for tonight. Tomorrow we will be here again at the same time, same place from the Jaffa Port, Israel. Have a great night.